The morning sun peeked through the blinds of Mercy's diner as Shanice Johnson wiped down the counter for the third time. It was almost spotless, but keeping busy helped pass the time during the mid-morning lull. The small bell above the door jingled as the local mailman walked in, nodding hello before taking his usual spot at the counter. "The usual, Pete?" Shanice asked, already reaching for a coffee mug. "You know it," he replied with a tired smile. Shanice had been working at Mercy's diner for nearly 7 years now. At 32, she knew every crack in the linoleum floor, every regular customer's order, and exactly how many steps it took to get from the kitchen to the farthest booth. The diner wasn't fancy, just a simple place with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh coffee always in the air. But it was steady work, and the tips helped pay for her night classes. Glancing at the clock on the wall, Shanice noted it was 11:25 a.m. She instinctively looked toward the door. Like clockwork, Ms. Eleanor Whitfield would arrive in 5 minutes. Tuesday and Friday, 11:30 a.m. sharp, never a minute early, never a minute late. "Order up," called Roy from the kitchen, sliding a plate of eggs and hash browns onto the pass-through counter. As Shanice delivered the plate to a young couple in the corner booth, she heard the familiar sound of wheelchair wheels on the entryway ramp. The door opened with a push, and there was Eleanor in her wheelchair, her silver hair neatly pinned back, wearing a powder blue cardigan despite the warm spring day outside. Shanice didn't rush over immediately. Eleanor preferred to wheel herself to her regular table by the window, the one where the afternoon sun wouldn't hit her eyes. It was part of the dignity she clung to, doing things for herself whenever possible. "Good morning, Miss Eleanor," Shanice said warmly, approaching the table once Eleanor had positioned herself just so. "Beautiful day out there." "Indeed it is," Eleanor replied, her voice carrying that slight refinement that came from her years as an elementary school teacher. At 64, Eleanor's face showed the lines of a life fully lived, but her eyes still held a sharpness that commanded respect. "Coffee first?" Shanice asked, though she already knew the answer. "Please, black with 1 sugar on the side," Shanice finished with a smile. "I remember." A small nod was Eleanor's only acknowledgement, but Shanice had learned to read the tiny expressions that crossed the older woman's face. That slight softening around the eyes was Eleanor's version of appreciation. What most people at the diner didn't know was that Eleanor had only been coming here for 3 years, ever since the car accident that took away her ability to walk. Before that, she had been a fixture at the fancy cafe across town. The accident changed everything for her, not just physically, but socially too. Old friends gradually stopped visiting, uncomfortable with her new circumstances. Her husband had passed away 2 years before the accident, leaving her to navigate this new reality alone. As Shanice poured the coffee, she noticed Eleanor's hands trembling slightly more than usual today. Without drawing attention to it, she placed the mug a little closer and made sure the handle was turned toward Eleanor's right hand, her stronger side. "The soup today is potato leek," Shanice offered. "Made fresh this morning." "That sounds lovely," Eleanor said, her eyes drifting to the window where a young mother pushed a stroller past the diner. Something in Eleanor's expression changed, a flicker of loss quickly masked. Shanice pretended not to notice. That was part of their unspoken arrangement. Eleanor never wanted pity, and Shanice never offered it. Instead, she gave something far more valuable, normalcy and respect. Walking back to the kitchen to place Eleanor's order, Shanice caught her own reflection in the polished surface of the coffee machine. Dark circles under her eyes testified to another late night of studying. Her nursing textbooks had kept her up until 2 a.m., but she was determined to finish her degree. Her 2 boys, Dander and Tyrell, deserved a better life than she'd had growing up. Little did Shanice know, as she called out Eleanor's order to Roy, that this routine, this simple interaction between a black waitress and a disabled white woman, was the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. 2 women from different worlds, brought together by circumstance, were forming a connection that would eventually transcend age, race, and social standing. For now, though, it was just another Tuesday at Mercy's dinner. Shanice grabbed a clean knife and fork, wrapped them in a napkin, and headed back to Eleanor's table, ready to continue their comfortable ritual, one that had been repeating itself twice a week for nearly 3 years. The first time Shanice noticed Eleanor struggling was on a busy Friday in October. The diner buzzed with the lunch crowd, dishes clattering and conversations overlapping into a familiar din. Elena sat at her usual window spot, attempting to fish her reading glasses from her handbag. Her fingers, stiff from arthritis and the lingering effects of her accident, fumbled with the zipper. Shanice was balancing 4 plates along her arm when she spotted Eleanor's frustration. The older woman's face remained composed, but her eyes betrayed a flash of helplessness that struck Shanice deeply. Without drawing attention, Shanice delivered her orders, then casually made her way to Eleanor's table. "Need a hand with anything, Miss Eleanor?" she asked, keeping her voice light, careful not to embarrass her. "I'm fine," Eleanor replied automatically, her pride creating an invisible wall between them. Shanice nodded, respecting the boundary. "Your chicken salad will be ready in about 5 minutes," she said, and walked away. But she kept watching from the corner of her eye as Eleanor continued to struggle. The next time Eleanor came in, Shanice quietly placed a small dish near her water glass. "For your glasses or whatever you might need," she explained with a simple shrug when Eleanor looked up questioningly. It wasn't charity, it was just practical. Eleanor's thank you was barely audible, but she used the dish. Winter arrived, bringing with it new challenges for Eleanor. Shanice noticed how the cold weather made Eleanor's hands shake more severely. One Tuesday, Eleanor ordered her usual turkey sandwich, but couldn't manage to cut it without the bread sliding around the plate. She put down her knife with a sigh of defeat that broke Shanice's heart. "Be right back with some more napkins," Shanice said, taking the plate with her. In the kitchen, she quickly cut the sandwich into manageable quarters before returning it to the table. "Kitchen made a mistake with your order," she explained casually. "All fixed now." Eleanor looked at the neatly quartered sandwich, then up at Shanice. Something passed between them, understanding, gratitude, and the beginnings of trust. Neither woman acknowledged it out loud. They didn't need to. After that day, Shanice always made sure Eleanor's meals arrived pre-cut when necessary. It became part of their unspoken routine, like the extra straws Shanice began keeping in her apron pocket after noticing Eleanor sometimes dropped hers, or how she'd refill Eleanor's water glass before it was empty so Eleanor wouldn't have to ask. "You're always so attentive to that woman in the wheelchair," commented Darlene, another waitress, one slow afternoon as they folded napkins together. Shanice shrugged. "Just doing my job." "No, it's more than that," Darlene observed. "You watch out for her." Shanice hadn't realized her actions were so noticeable. "My grandmother raised me to pay attention to people," she said simply. "Really see them, you know. And treat folks how they need to be treated, not just how you think they should be." What Shanice didn't say was how she recognized the look in Eleanor's eyes, the determination to maintain independence despite a body that was betraying her. It reminded Shanice of her own mother's struggle with illness years ago, before she passed. The memory still ached. As months passed, Shanice began to notice other things about Eleanor. How she sometimes stared out the window at families walking by, a profound sadness settling over her face like a veil. How she'd bring books to read but often just hold them unopened in her lap. How she'd linger over her coffee, seemingly in no hurry to return to an empty house. One rainy afternoon, the diner was particularly empty. Elena had been sitting alone for nearly 2 hours, occasionally glancing at her watch as if waiting for something or someone who never arrived. "Everything okay, Miss Eleanor?" Shanice asked as she refreshed her coffee for the 3rd time. Eleanor looked up, startled from her thoughts. "Oh, yes, fine." Then, after a pause, she added, "My daughter was supposed to call today. She lives in Arizona with her family." "That's nice," Shanice said, sensing there was more to the story. "We don't talk much anymore," Eleanor continued, surprising Shanice with this small confidence. "Not since I ended up in this chair. I think it scares her to see me this way." Shanice nodded, understanding how people could disappear when illness or disability entered the picture. She'd seen it happen too many times. "Well," Shanice said, making a split-second decision, "if you want to wait a bit longer, I made some fresh apple pie that needs tasting. On the house, of course. Can't sell something I haven't tested properly, right?" The smile that flickered across Eleanor's face was small but genuine. It was the first real smile Shanice had seen from her in months. These small moments and tiny kindnesses were nothing extraordinary in Shanice's mind. Just basic human decency. But for Eleanor, who had grown accustomed to either pity or indifference from others, they were quietly revolutionary. And neither woman yet realized how these small acts of compassion were laying the foundation for something much bigger than either could imagine. It was a stormy spring afternoon when the diner's door flew open, letting in a gust of wind along with a very wet Shanice. She was 30 minutes late for her shift, something that had never happened before. "I am so sorry," she told her manager, dripping rainwater onto the floor. "The bus broke down, and then I had to walk 6 blocks in this downpour after dropping my boys at my sister's place." The manager just nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's fine. Not too busy today anyway." As Shanice tied her apron, she glanced around the diner and spotted Eleanor at her usual table. Their eyes met briefly, and Shanice gave a small, apologetic wave. Elena responded with a slight nod. During a quiet moment between orders, Shanice approached Eleanor's table. "Sorry about the wait earlier. Crazy morning." "You look like you've been through quite an ordeal," Eleanor commented, noticing Shanice's damp hair and the dark circles under her eyes. Shanice sighed, allowing herself a rare moment of vulnerability. "My car finally gave up the ghost yesterday. Transmission's shot. Mechanic says it'll cost more to fix than the car's worth." Eleanor considered this. "That must be difficult with your boys to take care of." Shanice looked surprised. She'd mentioned her sons in passing, but hadn't realized Eleanor had been paying such close attention. "We'll manage," Shanice said with the quiet determination that had gotten her through tougher times. "Danda and Tyrell are used to riding the bus, and my nursing classes are just a few blocks from our apartment, so I can walk." Eleanor's eyebrows raised slightly. "Nursing school? I didn't know you were studying." Something in Eleanor's tone made Shanice defensive. Did this well-off white woman think someone like her couldn't aspire to be a nurse? "Yes, ma'am. 2 years in now. 1 more to go," Shanice replied, her chin lifting slightly. But instead of the condescension Shanice half expected, Eleanor's face softened with what looked like genuine admiration. "That's remarkable, working full-time, raising children and pursuing education. I taught elementary school for 35 years, and I've always respected people who balance multiple responsibilities." The tension in Shanice's shoulders eased. "What grade did you teach?" "3rd grade mostly. The perfect age. They're independent enough to tie their own shoes, but still think their teacher knows everything," Eleanor said with unexpected warmth. Shanice smiled, picturing a younger Eleanor surrounded by 8-year-olds. "My Tyrell's in 3rd grade. Loves science but hates sitting still." "An active mind often comes with an active body," Eleanor observed. "My students who couldn't stop wiggling were often the most creative thinkers." Their conversation was interrupted when another customer called for Shanice. As she turned to go, Eleanor spoke again. "Shanice, what area of nursing are you studying?" "Geriatric care," Shanice answered. "My grandma lived with us when I was growing up. Watching the home health nurses who helped her, they made such a difference. I want to do that for others." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. The world needs more people with that kind of motivation. Over the following months, their conversations grew longer and more personal. Shanice learned that Eleanor had lost her husband, Harold, to a heart attack 5 years ago. They'd never had children of their own, though Eleanor had a stepdaughter from Harold's first marriage who lived in Phoenix with her family. "We're not close," Eleanor admitted one quiet afternoon. "She calls on holidays, sends a card on my birthday. I think seeing me like this," she gestured to her wheelchair, "reminds her that life is fragile. Some people can't face that." Shanice understood all too well. "After my mama got sick, some of her friends just disappeared. Couldn't handle seeing her change." Eleanor looked up, recognition in her eyes. "Exactly. People say illness is lonely, but it's not the illness that isolates you, it's how others react to it." Despite the differences in their ages, races, and backgrounds, these shared understandings formed a bridge between them. Shanice began to see beyond Eleanor's sometimes prickly exterior to the resilience that kept her going after losing both her health and her husband. And Eleanor discovered the strength and determination that drove Shanice to build a better future for her sons despite countless obstacles. One Friday, as Shanice brought Eleanor her check, she hesitated before saying, "My boys have a school talent show next Thursday evening." Tyrell's doing a science demonstration and Dander's in the choir. She paused. I know it's nothing fancy, but if you'd like to come. The invitation hung in the air between them, unexpected and sincere. Eleanor looked genuinely surprised, then pleased. I'd like that very much. I haven't been to a school function since I retired. Neither woman acknowledged what a significant step this was, their relationship extending beyond the diner's walls for the first time. But both understood that something important had shifted, like the first small stones that begin an avalanche, setting in motion changes neither could yet imagine. The winter that year hit harder than anyone expected. Snow piled high on sidewalks, and temperatures dropped so low that schools closed for 3 days straight. Shanice's boys, Dander and Tyrell, were thrilled about their unexpected freedom, but for Shanice, it meant scrambling to find childcare while still making it to her shifts at the diner. Tuesday morning arrived with another blast of icy wind. Shanice pulled her thin coat tighter as she hurried through the diner's door, grateful for the rush of warm air that greeted her. Morning, Shanice, called Roy from the kitchen. Nasty out there, huh? Like walking through a freezer, she replied, hanging up her coat and grabbing her apron. Any word on how long this cold snap's gonna last? Weather folks say at least through the weekend, Roy said, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. The morning dragged on slowly, with few customers willing to brave the weather. By 11:45, Shanice found herself glancing repeatedly at the door. Elena was 15 minutes late, something that had never happened before in all the time she'd been coming to the diner. Maybe she's just running behind, suggested Darlene, noticing Shanice's concern. Ms. Eleanor is never late, Shanice said firmly. Never. By noon, with still no sign of Eleanor, a knot of worry had formed in Shanice's stomach. She tried to brush it off. People changed their routines all the time, especially in bad weather, but something didn't feel right. During her break, Shanice pulled out her phone and stared at it, debating with herself. Several months back, when Eleanor had ordered delivery during a previous snowstorm, she'd given Shanice her phone number. Shanice had saved it, though she'd never had reason to use it until now. This is silly, she muttered to herself. She probably just decided to stay home. Still, her finger hovered over the call button. What if Eleanor thought she was overstepping? What if she was fine and thought Shanice was being nosy? But what if she wasn't fine? Shanice pressed call. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail. Elena's crisp, formal voice asked her to leave a message. Hi, Miss Eleanor, it's Shanice from Mercy's Diner. Just checking that you're okay since you didn't come in today. This weather's something awful. Give me a call back when you get a chance. Throughout the rest of her shift, Shanice checked her phone repeatedly, but no call came. By the time she clocked out at 5:00 p.m., the worry had blossomed into genuine concern. You heading straight home? Her manager asked as she put on her coat. Shanice hesitated. I think I need to check on someone first. The bus was running late due to the weather, and by the time Shanice reached Eleanor's neighborhood, darkness had fallen. Unlike Shanice's apartment building on the south side of town, Eleanor's street featured neat houses set back from the road, most with well-maintained yards and 2 car garages. Even with the snow covering everything, the difference between this neighborhood and Shanice's was stark. She found Eleanor's house, a modest blue one-story with a wheelchair ramp leading to the front door. Walking up the driveway, Shanice noticed something odd. No lights were on inside, and no tracks disturbed the snow on the ramp. If Eleanor had left the house today, there would be marks from her wheelchair. Shanice rang the doorbell and waited, stamping her feet against the cold. No answer. She knocked loudly. Ms. Eleanor, it's Shanice from the diner. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, Shanice could make out the dim shape of the entryway, but no movement. She tried the doorbell again, holding it longer this time. Just as she was about to give up, Shanice heard something. Faint, but unmistakable, a call for help. Her heart jumped into her throat. Without hesitation, she tried the door handle. Locked. She looked around frantically, then remembered something Eleanor had once mentioned in passing about keeping a spare key under a flower pot for her cleaning lady. Shanice hurried to check the pots near the door. The third one she lifted revealed a small key. Her hands shook as she fitted it into the lock. The house was freezing inside, almost as cold as the outdoors. Ms. Eleanor? Shanice called, her breath visible in the chilly air. Here came a weak voice from the hallway. In the hall, Shanice rushed toward the sound and found Eleanor on the floor, still in her nightgown, her wheelchair tipped over beside her. She looked pale and was shivering violently. "Oh my God," Shanice gasped, kneeling beside her. "What happened? How long have you been down here?" "Since last night," Eleanor managed between chattering teeth. "Tried to get to the bathroom. Fell. Couldn't reach the phone." Shanice quickly assessed the situation, her nursing training kicking in. The house was freezing because the heating system had failed, probably since yesterday. Elena was dangerously cold, potentially hypothermic, and had been without food or water for nearly 24 hours. "I'm calling an ambulance," Shanice said firmly, already pulling out her phone. As she dialed 911, she took off her coat and draped it over Eleanor, then grabbed a throw blanket from the nearby couch for extra warmth. "Stay with me, Miss Eleanor," she said, taking the older woman's cold hand in hers. "Help is coming. You're not alone anymore." Eleanor's fingers weakly squeezed Shanice's. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Somehow I knew." The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Elena sat propped up against white pillows, looking smaller than Shanice had ever seen her. 3 days had passed since the ambulance had rushed her here with hypothermia and dehydration. "You don't have to keep coming back," Eleanor said as Shanice arranged fresh flowers on the bedside table. "I'm sure you have better things to do." Shanice just smiled. "My boys are at their aunt's house playing video games. Trust me, they're not missing me." The truth was, Shanice had rearranged her entire schedule to visit Eleanor every day after her shift. Something about finding the older woman so vulnerable had awakened a protective instinct in her that she couldn't explain. "The doctor says I can go home tomorrow," Eleanor said, fiddling with the edge of her blanket. Shanice paused. "That's good news. But what about when you get home? Is someone coming to help you?" Eleanor's silence was answer enough. "I tried calling your stepdaughter in Phoenix," Shanice said carefully. "The number was in your phone contacts." Eleanor's face tightened. "You shouldn't have done that." "She's coming to visit next week," Shanice continued, ignoring Eleanor's disapproval. "Said she'd been meaning to come for months anyway. She'll stay for 2 days, make lots of promises, then fly back to her life." Eleanor said with unexpected bitterness. "It's not her fault. She has her own family to worry about." Shanice sat on the edge of the bed. "Until she comes, how about I stop by after work? Just to help with groceries and make sure everything's okay." "I don't need charity," Eleanor said stiffly. "It's not charity, it's..." Shanice searched for the right word. "It's community. It's what people do for each other." Something in Eleanor's expression softened. "I suppose I could use some help with groceries, just until I'm back on my feet." Figuratively speaking, she added with a wry smile, gesturing to her wheelchair. 2 weeks later, what had started as a temporary arrangement had evolved into something more permanent. Shanice would stop by Eleanor's house 3 times a week, sometimes with her sons in tow. At first, she just helped with practical matters, picking up prescriptions, bringing in groceries, changing linens that were too difficult for Eleanor to manage. But over time, the visits became about more than just assistance. "Ms. Eleanor, can you help Tyrell with his math homework?" Shanice asked one evening as she prepared a simple dinner in Eleanor's kitchen. "I'm all thumbs when it comes to fractions." Eleanor's face lit up. "Of course. Bring your workbook over here, young man." Tyrell, usually shy around strangers, had taken to Eleanor surprisingly quickly. He dragged a chair next to her wheelchair and opened his math book. "Now think of fractions like pieces of pie," Eleanor began, her teacher's voice returning naturally. "If you have one whole pie cut into 4 equal pieces." From the kitchen, Shanice watched them with a smile. The retired teacher and the 8-year-old boy bent their heads together over the workbook, completely absorbed. Deanda, her 12-year-old, sat at the dining table working on a history assignment, occasionally asking Eleanor questions that she answered with thoughtful precision. It struck Shanice then how much this arrangement was helping all of them. Elena got the company and purpose she desperately needed. The boys got a quiet place to do homework away from their noisy apartment building, plus the benefit of a former teacher's guidance. And Shanice got peace of mind knowing Eleanor was safe, plus precious study time for her nursing courses, while Eleanor kept the boys occupied. "Dinner in 10 minutes," Shanice announced, stirring the pot of chili on the stove. "Can't we eat here?" Deandra asked. "Ms. Eleanor's helping me understand the Civil War better than my teacher does." Eleanor looked to Shanice with a question in her eyes, clearly not wanting to overstep. "Sure, if Ms. Eleanor doesn't mind," Shanice replied. "I'd be delighted," Eleanor said, and the genuine happiness in her voice was unmistakable. As they ate around Eleanor's dining table, Shanice realized how comfortable this felt, almost like family. The thought both warmed and frightened her. She'd learned early in life not to depend too much on others. People left, circumstances changed. But watching Eleanor patiently explain to Tyrell why he needed to eat his vegetables, Shanice felt something unfamiliar take root in her heart: trust. One evening as she was leaving, Eleanor wheeled herself to the door behind her. "Shanice," she said hesitantly, "I want you to know, having you and the boys here, it's made this house feel like a home again." Shanice felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "We like being here," she said simply. Neither woman put a name to what was happening between them. Neither acknowledged how quickly they had come to rely on each other, or how much they'd both had to lose if this fragile connection broke. But as winter melted into spring, their lives remained intertwined, a retired white teacher and a young black single mother, forming a bond that defied every expectation. The graduation ceremony was held in the community college auditorium on a perfect June evening. Shanice sat among her classmates in their navy blue nursing scrubs, hardly able to believe this moment had finally arrived after 3 grueling years of study. When they called her name, Shanice Johnson, associate degree in nursing, a whoop of joy erupted from the audience. She looked up to see Deandra and Tyrell jumping to their feet, clapping wildly. Beside them, Eleanor sat in her wheelchair, applauding with dignified pride, tears glistening in her eyes. Later, as people mingled with punch and cookies, Shanice made her way through the crowd to her small but precious cheering section. "Mom, you did it." Tyrell crashed into her with a hug that nearly knocked her off balance. "We knew you would," Deandra added, trying to sound cool but unable to hide his wide grin. Eleanor waited her turn, then reached for Shanice's hand. "I am so very proud of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Shanice squeezed her hand. "Couldn't have done it without you. All those evenings you let me study at your place, all the times you helped the boys with homework." She shook her head. "You're a big part of this, Ms. Eleanor." That night, they celebrated with pizza at Eleanor's house. As the boys bickered good-naturedly over the last slice, Eleanor motioned for Shanice to follow her into the living room. "I have something for you," Eleanor said, pulling an envelope from the drawer of her side table. "A graduation gift." Inside was a card with a simple message, "To new beginnings," and a check for $500. "Ms. Eleanor, I can't accept this," Shanice protested, trying to hand it back. "You most certainly can and will," Eleanor replied firmly. "Put it toward your licensing exam fees or a better car. Your choice." Shanice felt torn between gratitude and discomfort. Their relationship had never involved money before, and she didn't want Eleanor to think of herself as Shanice's benefactor. "Thank you," she said finally, tucking the envelope into her pocket. "But the best gift was having you there today." What Shanice didn't know was that Eleanor had been making other plans, far beyond a graduation check. The first hint came a week later when Shanice noticed an unfamiliar car in Eleanor's driveway. Inside, she found Eleanor sitting at the dining table with a serious-looking man in a suit. "Oh, I'll come back later," Shanice said, backing toward the door. "No, please stay," Eleanor said. "We're almost finished. This is Mr. Daniels, my attorney." The man nodded politely at Shanice before gathering his papers. "I'll have those documents ready for your signature next week, Eleanor," he said, closing his briefcase, "just as we discussed." After he left, Shanice raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" "Just getting my affairs in order," Eleanor said vaguely. "At my age, it's important to have things properly arranged." Shanice felt a chill. "You're not sick, are you? Something you haven't told me." Eleanor smiled reassuringly. "Nothing like that, just being practical." She changed the subject. "Have you heard back about any nursing positions yet?" Shanice hesitated, then nodded. "Actually, yes. 2 offers this week." That's wonderful. Where? City Hospital has a position in the geriatric ward, and Lakeside Regional offered me a spot in their rehabilitation center. Eleanor beamed. Both perfect for your interests. Which will you take? Shanice sat down heavily. I don't know yet. Lakeside pays better and has more opportunity for advancement, but, she trailed off. But what? It's almost 2 hours away. We'd have to move. Shanice stared at her hands. The boys would change schools. And you? She didn't finish the thought. Understanding dawned on Eleanor's face. You're worried about leaving me. Shanice looked up, her expression confirming Eleanor's words. Nonsense, Eleanor said firmly. You must take the better position. Your future and your boy's future come first. But as the days passed, Shanice couldn't bring herself to accept the Lakeside offer. The thought of Eleanor alone again, with no one checking on her, no children's voices filling her house, it didn't feel right. What Shanice didn't know was that her indecision was giving Eleanor time to finalize her own plans. Each time Shanice mentioned the job offers, Eleanor would encourage her to take the better opportunity, all while making secret arrangements with her attorney. Have you given Lakeside your answer yet? Eleanor asked one evening as they washed dishes side by side, Shanice washing while Eleanor dried what she could reach from her wheelchair. I asked for one more week to decide, Shanice admitted. Director Jones from City Hospital called again, said they really want me in the geriatric ward. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. You'd be wonderful there too, and it's close by. Yeah, Shanice agreed, but without enthusiasm. The position at City offered significantly less pay and limited advancement. It was the practical choice for their current situation, but not the best choice for her career. As she drove home that night, Shanice wrestled with her decision. The deadline was approaching, and she needed to choose the better job that would mean leaving Eleanor, or the lesser position that would allow her to maintain their connection. Neither option felt completely right, and Shanice had no idea that Eleanor was about to present her with a third path, one that would change all their lives forever. Friday lunch shifts at Mercy's Diner were always busy, but Shanice moved through the crowd with practiced ease. It had been nearly 2 years since she'd first served Eleanor, and though their lives had become deeply intertwined outside these walls, they maintained their routine. Eleanor at her window table every Tuesday and Friday at 11:30. Today felt different somehow. The deadline for Shanice's job decision loomed just hours away. By 5 o'clock, she needed to call either Lakeside Regional or City Hospital with her answer. The weight of the choice sat heavy on her shoulders as she approached Eleanor's table. The usual today? Shanice asked, notepad ready. Eleanor nodded. Yes, but I'd like to speak with you when you have a moment. Nothing urgent, she added, seeing Shanice glance around at her other tables. Be right back with your iced tea, Shanice promised, hurrying to the kitchen. 20 minutes later, when the lunch rush had eased slightly, Shanice returned to Eleanor's table with her meal. Sorry about the wait. What did you want to talk about? Have you made your decision yet? About the job? Eleanor asked, carefully cutting into her chicken salad sandwich. Shanice sighed. Deadlines today. I'm leaning towards City Hospital, even though the pay's not as good. Eleanor studied her for a moment, because it's closer to home. Closer to me. It wasn't a question, and Shanice didn't deny it. The boys love you, Ms. Eleanor, and I worry about you being alone again. That's what I thought, Eleanor said, nodding as if confirming something to herself. Shanice, you deserve that position at Lakeside. It's the right next step for your career. But. No buts, Eleanor interrupted firmly. I've lived long enough to know that opportunities missed rarely come around again. Before Shanice could respond, another customer called for her attention. The conversation was left hanging as she hurried off to refill coffee cups and take orders. Throughout the rest of her shift, Shanice kept turning the situation over in her mind. Maybe Eleanor was right. Maybe she was sacrificing too much by choosing the lesser position. But the thought of moving away, of Eleanor alone in that house, of her boys losing this woman who had become like family to them, it was too painful to consider. As the afternoon wound down, Shanice brought Eleanor her check as usual. But this time, Eleanor handed her something in return, a small white envelope. What's this? Shanice asked, puzzled. Open it later when you get home, Eleanor said, her voice strangely calm. And whatever you decide about the job, know that I support you completely. Shanice slipped the envelope into her apron pocket, wondering at the serious look on Eleanor's face. "Thanks, Miss Eleanor. See you Tuesday." Eleanor smiled. "We'll see each other before then, I think." It wasn't until Shanice was on the bus heading home, feet aching from her shift, that she remembered the envelope. She pulled it out, turning it over in her hands. It felt slightly heavy for its size. Inside was a house key and a folded note written in Eleanor's neat, precise handwriting. Shanice's heart began to pound as she read, "Dear Shanice, you've given me dignity when I needed it most. Now I want to give you security. My home is yours. The deed has been changed. My car is in the garage for when you need it. Your kindness crossed every boundary society placed between us. Now your boys will have a yard to play in, and you'll have a shorter drive to the hospital, where I know you'll make an exceptional nurse. All I ask is that you visit sometimes. Some angels have wings, others wear aprons. With love and gratitude, Eleanor." Shanice's hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the key. The bus stopped, and she looked up, disoriented, tears blurring her vision. She had missed her usual stop and was now just 2 blocks from Eleanor's house. No, her house, according to the note. Without thinking, she pulled the cord for the next stop and practically ran the remaining distance. She found Eleanor in the backyard, watching Danda and Tyrell play basketball on the small court that had been Harold's pride and joy. "What is this?" Shanice demanded, holding up the key and note, her voice shaking. "You can't just give me your house." Eleanor looked up calmly. "I most certainly can. It's already done. The paperwork was finalized yesterday." "But why?" Shanice's voice cracked. "Why would you do this?"